And now I'd like to introduce our presenter. Dan Barry brings 30 years of environmental campaigning and local government service to Path to Positive Communities, a program that he directs to amplify support for local climate mitigation and resilience efforts through partnerships with trusted institutions that bring together local leaders across key community sectors and provide engagement strategies and content designed to broaden public support for local policies and programs. Prior to joining Eco America, Dan served as a senior climate policy analyst for the District of Columbia Department of Environmental Office of Policy and Sustainability, where he advanced climate mitigation and preparedness plans for the nation's capital and created sector-based sustainability pledges. Prior to DDOE, Dan worked for 25 years with local, state, national, and international environmental advocacy organizations, including VPRIG, Rural Vermont, Environmental Working Group, Clear Americans for the Environment, Friends of the Earth, Environmental Defense Fund, and Save Our Environment. Thank you all for being here, and Dan, I will pass it on to you.
Thank you, Grace. Thank you very much for the introduction. Let me just check if you are able to see my slide. Here we go. I've got the box in front of me. Here we go. Come on. All right, show my screen. Am I showing?
There we go, I see you.
All right, great, thank you. I want to thank everybody for joining today. Thanks to LGC. We've had a wonderful partnership with LGC. And thanks again, Grace, for getting us kicked off. This is part 2 of a 2-part series that we did. And for folks that were around a month or so ago, the early part will be sort of review. I want to go over some of the values conversation we had just to kind of set up the conversation and the presentation around doing local engagement and how to use communications to support good engagement around climate solutions. And I will use jargon terms in this presentation, even though we advise against that. And when I say climate, I mean the broad range of sustainability, livability, energy solutions, clean communities, and climate. So with that, let's get started. Our mission at Eco America is to build a critical mass of institutional support and leadership, public support and political will for definitive climate solutions in the United States. And we have programs and resources that serve to elevate leadership. The goal is to shift the national narrative and build collective impact around climate solutions. Next slide. So in review, you know, this map shows that the majority of people in this country, and this is a congressional district level, believe that climate change is happening. We do have that belief on our side. However, there's a lot of confusion about whether humans are causing the Earth to warm. And we have to know that there are quite a number of people out there that do not believe that humans are the primary cause of climate change. However, most adults very strongly feel that there are smart ways to fix global warming or climate change. So there is hopefulness around the solutions that we can offer. But, and this is all according to the Yale program on climate change communications from last year, most adults are not talking about global warming or climate change. And that's part of our mission, to make this a conversation that people are comfortable having within their communities and amongst their trusted leaders and their friends and their tribes. The reason we think, and social science supports motivated avoidance as the core reason why people don't want to talk about climate change. They're fearful about it. They suffer confirmation bias or believe that basically people believe what they want to believe and they're not open to new ideas. So it's difficult to break through that. There's a sense that technology will solve this problem. People generally want to avoid conflict and environmental issues, and climate change is viewed as a very highly political, conflict-laden conversation. Everybody has competing priorities. There are social norms that make it difficult for people to break out of their tribal biases and take part in new conversations and accept new ideas. And there's also, with such a big problem that's so complex, a strong sense of fatalism and resignation. So how do we shake people out of that motivated avoidance and get them involved in the community solutions that LGC and its members are offering around the state of California and elsewhere. What Eco-America is espousing is that we need to continue to evolve climate messaging. We left the global warming phase, the Armageddon phase, where we talked about global warming as a global disaster. We moved through a phase where we talked about the social benefits and opportunities of good solutions. And now we're moving into the personally relevant solutions to families and to our health and to other deeply personal values that people hold. And we really feel that that's the right frame to use in order to get people's attention and keep their attention on the solutions that we offer. A little more background on Eco-America. We do a tremendous amount of research. We have on our website lots and lots of research going back years and years. We do polling and survey work, and then we generate communications guides and other tools that help leaders across key prominent community sectors talk about and engage people in climate change. And the key sectors where we work are in local communities, civic and elected leaders. We also have a very evolved program that deals with major faith associations and faith leaders. And we're also working very closely with major healthcare and public health associations and their leaders. And we're hoping eventually we'll be able to bring civic leaders together with local faith leaders and local health leaders in order to broaden the conversation and involve more people, more ordinary people, in understanding how climate solutions can benefit them in their communities. We do a lot of research, as I said, starting from meta-analysis, where we look at polls like the Yale poll and other polls that are published almost weekly about climate change now. We also do our own research. We conduct focus groups. We do online dial tests, and we run our own surveys in order to hone in on the core American community values around climate change, but also, as I said, to help us develop the guidance we offer around communications and engagement. We start with values, and this report from 2014 was the most recent American Climate Values Report. We're releasing another one in the beginning of next year, and we're very much looking forward to how American climate values have evolved in the last 3 years. But why do we use values? This framework sort of explains it. The way climate influences weather, we feel that values influence opinions, and there's a fair amount of research that shows that your core values influence your opinions, your attitudes, and your behaviors. And that allows us to develop frames that appeal to people's values. And those frames then permit us to craft messages that are effective, that result in positive interactions, positive communications, and ideally help to build that public awareness and political will that we're working towards. We know from research that our values are established early in life and they don't change very much or quickly. They do change, but people make choices based on those core personal values. If we want people's behaviors and attitudes to change, we've got to help inform their values. We can't change their values, we can't impose our own, but we can appeal to their values and show how the work that we do can benefit them and the values that they already hold. And it really, you know, at the core, if we're going to achieve large-scale social change around climate, we're going to have to evolve people's core personal values more towards the sustainability and community concern level. The report is quite extensive. I encourage you to read it, but I just want to quickly summarize the top insights. People are tribal in this country. Our tribes include our families, our neighborhoods, our faith denomination, where we work, the sports that we follow. These sorts of identities and these tribal connections are what help to influence and inform our values. We do put our family first. There is a sense that the American dream is a real and important level of achievement, and so people value that level of achievement. When we talk about climate problems, we actually really need to be talking about the benefits. In order to get people to act, they need to understand what the benefits are. That is a core value. And there's also a danger in climate action coming off as an elite and an alienating concern. It's just the environmentalists or it's just the elected leaders. We're trying to break through that through our work with faith leaders and health leaders and others to show that it's not an elite concern. It's actually a community concern that impacts most people. So I want to go through a couple of things around engagement. Engagement, we'll go through that first, and then I want to give you some communications tips that will help you as the foundation for good engagement, good communications. How do you have and hold a conversation? How do you keep an audience with you? And that will go through a report called the 15 Steps for Effective Climate Communications. So if you're here, hopefully you're interested in engaging the community. Why? Well, this is how we communicate with and build connections, ongoing permanent relationships with institutions and leaders. And the purpose really of good engagement is community benefit. That's why we do the work we do. It's important to keep in mind that good community engagement is a process, but it's also an outcome. And the process is really important. So why engage the community? Part 2. All right. High levels of engagement result in greater participation in community improvement. By doing good engagement, you build social capital locally. You build social ties, networks, and the support that you need to do better community work and promote the well-being of the community. And it's important to keep in mind that engagement is really about participatory decision-making. And when you do that, when you involve the community and you engage the leaders and the stakeholders in that decision-making process, you can learn a lot. You can learn about the community, you can learn about their strengths, their concerns, and really gain a level of familiarity and knowledge that that is necessary to continue to do the good work that you do. Here's a graphic on slide 17 that essentially shows there is a range of community engagement. A lot of local leaders make the mistake of simply informing the community about the work they're doing. The further to the right of this you go, the more engagement, the more participation you are engendering in your engagement program. From just informing to consulting. Involving people in the decision-making process begins to look a lot more like collaboration, and eventually, if you really start to make connections through your community engagement program, you've empowered your community. And there's nothing but upside to that. It's a lot of work, don't get me wrong, but an empowered community is one that is fully invested in making decisions, making choices, and moving the conversation forward. So I've got a couple of checklists here, and I put these little boxes because these are things you can check off. Make your engagement process easy. Demonstrate your leadership first. Always interact with the community at whatever levels you can, and welcome and empower new voices in your engagement program. That's where you can learn a lot about your community, and as I said a minute ago, what their concerns are and what their view is of the solutions you have to offer. They might even have some solutions you haven't thought of. Identify and support other leaders from other sectors and engage them in the engagement work you're doing. Make sure that they're a part of it. Showcase and promote little L leaders, a term that I like to use because all the leadership that you're looking for, you don't have to be a CEO or an elected official to be a leader. In fact, some of the most important leaders in a community have no title whatsoever, but they pull a neighborhood together. They are the leader of their tribe. And if you can find them and identify with them and engage them in your work, you will gain a tremendous amount of information and power through connecting those networks. Always make sure you have rewards, reward people's contributions and the contributors themselves. And as you do engagement, make it public. There are so many platforms for publicizing your work. It's really easy these days to share the information you're putting out there, to share events that are coming up, to showcase the participation in those events. So really make it a visibly public process so that people feel that they're welcome to join. Here are some more steps, and this is, again, a checklist. So these kind of happen in somewhat this order. So you want to assess and evaluate your engagement needs and your goals and your capacity. Make sure that you don't bite off more than you can do, or more than you can chew, because capacity really is important for doing good engagement. Define success, and that really is good enough, good enough. If you have the capacity to do more engagement and that helps you, then do everything you can, but make sure that you understand the steps to success and what success means to you. I'll talk a little bit more about mapping your community. You all know who lives there, but be a little more curious. It's helpful to really figure out the stakeholders and the intentional communities within your geopolitical community and identify what their needs are around climate solutions. Identifying community institutions and leaders that can help is important. Again, we've been working a lot with faith and health leaders, but there are other sector leaders and stakeholders in every community that are interested in this and can help you. And then so once you've identified them, make sure you secure their commitments and make their commitment visible so that the community sees that it's not just a narrow set of leaders, it's a broad set of leaders in their community that are talking about and advocating for solutions. And then engagement. That is really the heart of the work. There are, and it's impossible to describe this in one line, but I tried here, provide opportunities, context, content, support, and aid. With, among, and through your trusted leaders, large L and little l, engage the community. And it is a very, very energy intensive set of steps to do to really do good engagement. And this is really where the benefits start to accrue for your engagement program. Make sure you have rewards to keep people involved and track data and success stories. There are, again, many platforms where you can brag about the success that you're having, but also the success of your other leaders in the community. Make sure people feel that they're being highlighted as a successful leader and that the benefits to the community are being highlighted as well. And that means sharing successes. The more you share successes, the more people will engage, the more success and support you'll get. And then, as I said, good engagement is a process, not a goal, so you have to repeat it. Once you've gone through a cycle of meetings and recruitment, you know, again, be curious about what else you can do and whom else you can involve. A few tips. As you're doing engagement, acknowledge emotion. There are emotional issues around climate and energy and sustainability. It's not just a set of policy decisions, it's about community well-being, and people have a lot of emotions around that. Focus on local opportunities, local risks, local solutions. And the solutions and co-benefits are just as powerful as emphasizing the risks or the dangers that exist within the community, whether it's to people's personal health or continuity of critical services or whatever. We all know that communities face risks with changing climate, but again, the better frame to emphasize is the solutions and the benefits of the sorts of policies and programs that you're hoping to put in place or expand in your local community. Work through and strengthen social networks that exist. They're out there, tap into them, work with them, work across and through those groups to gain more voices and more points of entree into the community. And whenever you're building a plan, whenever you're giving a talk, whenever you're describing what solutions you have, make sure the solutions are evident and that they are the lead. Don't bury the lead, as they say in press relations. Make sure you lead with solutions so that people can see the benefit that will accrue. Again, the personal relevance is what we're going for with engagement and communications. So this is an important thing for all of us to do if we're building an engagement program, and I've just got a couple of slides here. So what does your community look like? Who lives there? What are the sectors? What are the tribes? You know, who do you hope to reach in your community climate engagement program? But this is the critical point. On slide 23, you have to understand that in stakeholder mapping, you've got to identify your likely supporters, the folks that are on the fence or are neutral, and the anticipated opposition. And the reason for this is that in virtually any political campaign, once you identify your base, you support them, you have a different kind of relationship and a different kind of conversation with them because they're, quote unquote, with you. The folks that are on the fence or are neutral, and that's going to be the vast majority of most community members, are on the fence or neutral. You haven't reached them yet, they're not sure how they feel or how they want to get involved. That's the base, that's the core of the community that you want to try to reach. And when it comes to the anticipated opposition, not only anticipate who they are, you need to anticipate what they may try to do to confuse other members of the community, to delay or complicate your plans, or to oppose you politically or publicly. And that's a critical factor when you get to your communication skills, because you have to anticipate negative questions, negative comments, and be prepared as a communicator and as an organizer to address them. So I'm going to kind of go quickly through the 15 steps for effective communications. This is another report that's available on our website for free. It's broken into 3 large categories. The first steps If you follow these steps, and we recommend you do, the research that we've done shows that these steps make sense in the order I'm about to present them to you. The first part of a written article or a speech or a set of comments you want to make as you're building a communications tool or effort, you build rapport first. Once you've built rapport with your audience, you inspire and empower them to understand what your solutions are and what you're asking them to do. And then the third portion, steps 11 through 15, are different ways that you can strengthen your message. There are many things you can do to undermine your message, but these are some important steps that will help you strengthen your message as you're engaging in communications. And again, this can be in a blog post, it can be a story that you tell, it can be a speech you give before a local stakeholder group like the Chamber of Commerce or a local faith denomination. So these tips can work in virtually any context that you have in front of you where good communications is a tool that you need to deploy. So let's go through the top 10, and I'll try to move pretty quickly. Start with people, stay with people. Our whole thing is that people are the core to climate solutions on the local level. And so when you start to engage your audience, you need to show that you care about them. You need to start from their perspective, using tangible, relevant concerns that are relevant and tangible to your community and the people that live there. And once you do that, once you establish that this is about a communication between people, this is a conversation that people are having, then you can start to talk about climate issues, local solutions. Every community has a set of common values. Again, geopolitical communities or intentional communities like faith or business associations. So knowing your audience, and that gets back to your audience mapping, if you know their concerns and their priorities, you'll be able to craft a message that appeals to those values and those priorities and concerns. Common values are powerful motivators. Once you've established that common connection around values, people feel that you're having a conversation with them. They don't feel that they're being talked at or preached to. And we want to make sure that people feel welcome in the conversation. Otherwise, they will leave. They may not physically leave the room, but if you lose your audience's attention, it's extremely difficult to get them back. So building rapport is an incredibly important step. This is another one. So I showed you the map earlier that people believe climate change is a real thing. They don't know why, and they don't know what the impacts are. They don't know what their role in climate change is, whether it's causing it or solving it. Acknowledge ambivalence. It's a mistake to make your presentation with such a degree of certainty that people feel that if they disagree or they're not really clear, that they're not a part of the conversation. Acknowledge that people have different levels of concern or awareness. Respect different perspectives, and it's as simple as saying something like, some of us are more worried about climate change than others, or some of us have noticed things changing in the community and ascribe it to our changing climate. Other people aren't so sure. This really allows people to stay in the conversation and permits you to get to the ask and the points that you want to make later. Holding your audience to the very end of the conversation or the article is a really important skill. Again, there goes the fading picture. The picture was a flooded community. So virtually any community that you can talk about now, and increasingly communities are suffering, the anticipated risks are now becoming realities. There are local realities, whether they're disasters or they're slowly degrading environment or other impacts, economic and health, that people are experiencing today. So point out relevant realities that are local, so folks can identify with the problem that you hope to solve. By discussing the realities, you can avoid arguing the science, which again, is a real loser point. People will drop the conversation if they feel that they are not smart enough to understand the science. And there's plenty of examples out there. So once you've used the opportunity to point to a couple of examples your audience will understand, you can then pivot to solutions. And that is our next point. Emphasize those solutions. This is the heart of your communications. There are co-benefits to virtually any solution that you want to offer. There are sacrifices, and we're aware of that. We're not trying to present a Pollyanna view of climate engagement and communications, but the more you can stay on message about solutions and co-benefits to health and community well-being, and use examples, including things that are already being done in your community, like bike lanes or planting tree canopy, those sorts of things. People, again, will equate the solutions that you are talking about to their personal life and to their local community. And again, avoid messages of sacrifice if you can. Don't get bogged down with that, even though you may have to acknowledge it. The most important thing is to emphasize the solutions. We also advise that people use inspirational and empowering language. It may sound hokey to some of us if we're not used to framing things around hope and opportunity. You know, reminding people that, you know, the Americans are leaders, we're problem solvers. That's been our national ethos since the beginning of our country. You know, these are values that people in this country truly do believe in. So remind them of that we can solve these problems, but it will take all of us. There are opportunities. There is reason for hope. Personal benefits are incredibly important, and there are a number of different ways that you can point to benefits that people in your audience will understand. Where you can, talk about energy savings or cost savings around saving energy or reducing transportation costs, that sort of thing. You know, people believe in the American way. They believe in prosperity. So talking about pocketbook and economic values and solutions is important. Health benefits are clear. We know the impacts of dirty air and dirty communities. So when you talk about pocketbooks and improved health and community health, equate it to people's personal lives and well-being. Living in a clean community will benefit them and their families. So try to focus on those personal benefits as much as you can when you're communicating. And have an ask. I've done lots and lots of campaigning over the course of 30 years. It's rare that you want to have a conversation with someone about a set of solutions you hope to put in place and not have an ask. In fact, if you come to this point in your communication with someone, they're expecting you to give them a couple of things that they can do. Once you've raised their awareness and you've kept them in this conversation, you can get them to take action. It may be small, it may be one or two simple things, and that's okay. Because making the asks accessible and providing those one or two ideas allow someone to go ahead and get involved. And the ask could be change your light bulbs. It could be don't water your lawn on certain days. It could be come to a community meeting. It could be get out and vote. There's a million things we can ask people to do. Don't ask them to do a million things all at once because there is a ladder of engagement. And we all have seen this happen in much of our work, I'm sure. You get people involved at a certain level. They see that it's easy and doable. They get a sense of personal gratification and reward. Then they want to do more. So make sure you have an ask. And then, you know, a corollary to this is make sure you're in a position to follow up if they want more information about what else they can do. You might really have gotten the community leader, a little L leader, to make a commitment here to pursue additional solutions. I said earlier that sequence matters. The research that went into this 15 steps guide included research by psychological linguists and campaign professionals who essentially told us that if you do these first 8 steps in a row, it's much more effective than if you mix and match these steps. So if you have the luxury of writing comments or talking points or an article, take a look at this page, take a look at the guide, and follow these steps to the extent that you can. It will really strengthen your ability to keep your audience and get to the ask at the end of your presentation. And the last one in this section is describe, don't label. So we all in our industry and virtually any professional industry suffers the risk of using jargon and language that is not accessible to people outside of our industry. So if you talk about sustainability, many people don't understand that term, or they don't understand adaptation, greenhouse gases. These sorts of jargon or technical terms or acronyms tend to confuse people, and they weaken your ability to communicate with them. So use common language that which is easy enough to find. Use common language that allow people to understand what you're talking about. The report that I'm showing right now is, again, available on our website. it has a page that actually goes through, and the terminology we use in that report is replace and embrace. So replace greenhouse gas emissions with pollution. Simple word choice. And again, depending on your audience, if you know your audience and you know that they may not understand that jargon, avoid it. If you know that the audience does understand it, of course you can use language that's more familiar to you. But the key competency here, knowing your audience and scaling your communications to their awareness and what they're able to absorb. And then the final 5 steps here are, again, strengthening your communications. When you're talking with or writing to an audience, have a powerful fact from a trusted messenger. That trusted messenger in many cases may not be your U.S. Senator or the President. It may be the American Lung Association. It may be a local faith leader who's well known, or a local celebrity, whether they're an entertainment celebrity, a business celebrity, or what have you. Trusted messengers lend credibility. And again, people can identify with them if they're aware of who they are and they know that they are trustworthy. They're not elite or alienating, as our values research pointed out, can be a real risk. Really avoid the doom and gloom. People are aware of the risks and the impacts that are happening. Let's not emphasize them if we can get away from that, because people tune out. Once people feel that all hope is lost, it leads to fatalism, and it does not permit them really psychologically and emotionally to continue to stay involved and to do extra steps such as what you're asking them to do. We know this from people who are faith leaders that we work with, that using stories is a great way to strengthen engagement. So you can talk about climate solutions without ever using climate or solutions. You can weave a story that follows these steps in a way that engages an audience and gets them to where you want them to be in awareness and action by using a story, by telling a fable about an experience you had and how you ended up learning something or gaining a new competency or participating in a solution. Stay above the fray. Basically, that's learn not how to get bogged down in details or arguments, especially with people who are opposed to you. And with any campaign, message discipline is critical. So once you've established your core message, you really got to stay with it, or again, you risk confusing people. So this is going to be a little bit of review. Most of us who work in the public interest have not received communication skills training. I have a couple of times. I'm not a communications trainer by avocation, but I want to offer some basic tips. Now that you've had a chance to talk about, to learn a little bit about community engagement, learn about the 15 steps for climate communications, here are some ways to keep and hold an audience, just in terms of the skills of public speaking. So public speaking best practices, I want to go over that for a minute. Again, underscoring how frames can work for us and against us. Using a core message, that's your elevator speech, and it's important to have one when you're approaching a conversation. There are values language that we can use, and it's something that we call the Inlaw Test. How would you talk about this with somebody who's not in the climate movement, the in-laws, for instance? And then it's always important when you have a core message to repeat and repeat and repeat your core message. That's, again, another nod to the importance of message discipline. When you're speaking, when you're making a set of public comments, or you're being interviewed on the radio or television, speak slowly in plain language. Again, no jargon. Again, the 10-second message, the elevator speech is important to have and to repeat it often. Be concise. Less is more. Know what you want to say that, and then try not to ramble on. When you're giving an interview or speaking in public, try not to use notes if you can. Certainly in radio or phone interviews, you can have notes in front of you, but you don't want to sound like you're reading from notes if you can avoid it. You'll sound more natural. Learn the pivot. So you see this all the time in political debates and even when people are being interviewed. It's the fine art of asking a question by answering the question you wanted them to ask, not the one they actually asked. This happens all the time. Someone will ask a tough question, and the speaker will pivot by saying, well, I understand that concern, but what I'm here to talk about is X, Y, Z. So the pivot is a very excellent skill, and one that requires a little bit of practice, like all of these things, but it really does help you get through an interview or a potentially tough question and keep you on your core message. And remember, you control the speech or the interview. Remain in control, anticipate questions, and pivot away from anything that is difficult or challenging that you don't really want to talk about or you don't know the answer to. And of course, as always, be friendly, polite, and professional. So it is okay if you're being interviewed. If you don't know the answer, it's okay to say, I don't know. If somebody asks you a technical science question, you can say, I don't know the answer to that. I'm not a climate scientist, but what I do know is that in our community, we've got plenty of opportunities to solve the impacts that we're starting to see. Again, pivot into what you know and stay away from what you don't know. If you're asked a negative question, again, stay away from it. Get to the pivot. Don't restate a negative question or frame because that just reinforces the sense that there's a negative side to what you're talking about, and you want to stay on the positive side. Knowing how, when, and how to pivot is important, and these are some ways to do it. What we're really talking about here is my core message. The truth of the matter is we have local solutions, my core message. Let's look at the facts. These are some helpful means for a speaker in an interview or in testimony or public comments to pivot back to the core message. We spoke last time and a little bit this time about the importance of framing. So here's an example of what that means. We use the freedom frame. So when we talk about American values, freedom is an incredibly important American value. And there are ways that can work against us and ways that can work for us. So the freedom frame working against us is when we're faced with people saying that government regulations of fossil fuels or the government picking winners and losers. So how does that work against us? Well, it doesn't really talk about the local solutions that you're trying to put in place, or it sort of pigeonholes them in a place where you're not able to talk about broad community benefits, the personally relevant local benefits that you're putting in place around climate and energy. So how would we change that frame and have the freedom frame working for us as we communicate locally? Here are some examples of framing the freedom frame a little bit more positively. We know from our research that Americans very strongly believe in the right to clean air and clean water. So that's a fundamental American freedom that American people understand and ascribe to. We know that democratization of clean energy and transportation is a more positive frame than government control or the government picking losers and winners. So if we can talk about how clean energy gives opportunity, diverse transportation gives people additional opportunities to save money and be healthy, then that's a way that the freedom frame is reinforcing community values and positive solutions. A little bit about the core message. Okay, the core message is that elevator speech, as we say. It communicates the most important idea or message that you have in one or two sentences. And what that really means is that if you've got a topic, you've got to really stick to that topic and have that core message. You can write the core message down if you're presenting something for people to read. But if you're in public meetings or you're making a presentation, it's important to memorize that to the extent that you can. What is your elevator pitch that describes what you do and what you're hoping your audience will do or come to understand? Again, using accessible, values-based language will really help you underscore the connections that you have with your audience, and it helps to shape and inform the rest of your communications. You want to explain the reason that you're there, the topic of the conversation, the solutions that you have, and how people can help. That is as we say, the elevator pitch, and it's a real core skill that most folks need to learn and will find to be incredibly valuable. So back to the Inlaw test. Those are actually not my in-laws. Those are Muppets, and But the in-law test is, you know, when you're going home or you're going to your family for Thanksgiving or you're meeting some new folks or whatever, it's shorthand for, again, the elevator pitch, using simple, clear, values-oriented language, using concrete examples of what you do or what your concerns are, your solutions, rather than scientific abstractions or policy abstractions, and using, you know, again, clear values language that doesn't include jargon, technical terms, acronyms, those sorts of things that might confuse people, and make them feel like they don't understand what you're talking about. So here's a couple of examples. Here's a bad one and a good one. Decarbonization. Okay, nobody knows what that means. Decarbonization now is critical to combating climate change and will have a positive impact on planetary health. Well, what if instead, for certain audiences, you said burning dirty fuels causes pollution. Pollution causes asthma, so reducing dirty fuels is good for kids and for everyone. So that's decarbonization in a way that an ordinary person would have a better understanding of what you're talking about and what the benefits are that you're describing, the benefits to them that you're describing. And the last tip about this is repeat, 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 whether it's stakeholder mapping or engagement strategies or the core message. As a community change agent, your job is never done. There's always additional folks that you can reach out to. There are always additional communities you can begin to build relationships with. And there are always going to be policy solutions, local programs that you want to put in place that will address energy, address transportation, and will put climate solutions on the map in your community. The whole thing is a process. It's cyclical, and over time, those cycles end up building your strength as community leaders and your ability to solve these problems. So it's really, it bears repeating. You've got to repeat all of these things. I want to quickly just remind you that we have a ton of resources on our website. And here you see that the three logos for the sectors that we work in. I run Path to Positive Communities, working with local government leaders. Our programs for faith and for health are also there, Blessed Tomorrow and Climate for Health. They have websites as well. If you're working with the faith community or with healthcare leaders, I really advise that you take a look. We have a lot of research that's made and put out specifically for leaders in these sectors, including the particular word selections and the frames that work best for those leaders and for those communities. So it's valuable research, and I invite you to take advantage of it. I'm going to try with a couple of minutes here to show you a little video. So hopefully this is working. I can. All right. We have a partnership in Los Angeles called Path to Positive Los Angeles, and at a recent event, the leader there put together this very interesting play, and I'm going to run through it really quickly. Hopefully people will find it enjoyable. It's based on a family getting together for Thanksgiving, and so I'm going to let it roll.
This looks amazing. All right. Steve, on the way, I can tell you again.
We can all have a word of prayer,
Of
please.
course.
Dear Lord, we'd like to thank you for the gifts we are about to receive. Thank you for your bounty and the hands that prepared it. Please watch over all who are present and those who are not able to join us. Please watch over Thomas, who is currently studying at
Looks like we lost the video there, Dan. There we go. I'm not hearing any audio from the video.
for a change.
Free you have no idea. It is
Are you hearing it?
always freezing cold here in November. So much for global warming.
She's right, you know. Did you guys know that the coldest Thanksgiving in Boise history was in 1985, got down to 2 degrees?
2 degrees.
And the warmest Thanksgiving was way back in the 1890s. So go figure. Coldest turkey day in recent history, and the warmest was over 100 years ago. So much for so-called global warming and climate change. I got to tell you guys, I'm so sick and tired of this alarmist nonsense. The idea that the weather is changing and human beings are responsible, the entire thing is a hoax. Joe, you don't know what you're talking about.
Joey, can we please not get into this again? Yeah, I'm with Tara, guys. Can we just not do this? It's Thanksgiving. Let's find something else to talk about.
Okay.
No,
Thank you.
you can't just say something like that and drop it at the table.
Nick.
No, I'm sorry, dear. No, this is important. We got to talk about it. Look, in spite of what your boy Trump said when he did the Paris Accord,
We didn't vote for Trump.
Yeah.
regardless, okay, there is a general consensus in the scientific community that climate change is real, it's happening, and it's us humans that are creating it.
Well, Nick, last I looked, you're not a scientist. But you want to know somebody who knows science? I know science because I got my degree in engineering, and I use math and science every day at work. So, I'm telling you, the entire thing, if you tell me that there's a consensus among scientists, I'm telling you there's not, because this scientist says you're wrong.
Can you please
Among
stop the
published climate scientists, there's a 97% consensus among the scientific community that climate change is damn real, it's happening, and we're causing
I
it.
don't see it.
1910, there's 155 glaciers. Today, there's only 25 left.
Melting and forming since the beginning of time.
Increased global temperatures have bleached 40% of the coral reef. Coral reef?
Most of it's too remote to study properly.
Okay, what about this one? 1 gallon of gas creates 20 pounds of carbon dioxide. You add that.
Well, then answer me this, smart guy. What's the number one greenhouse gas?
I mean, what are we talking about? Carbon dioxide or methane?
Methane is made of cow fart.
Number one greenhouse gas is water vapor. Water vapor, clouds, humidity. It makes up like 85% of the greenhouse effect. Carbon dioxide makes up like 1 part per million dispersed across this great vast atmosphere. I'm telling you guys, the entire thing is a hoax. Idiot.
What'd you call it?
Hello. My name is Aaron Lyons, and we are thrilled to be here at Climate Day LA so you can meet climate change denying Uncle Joe and his lovely wife, Lisa. Be nice. We'll win them over eventually. Believe it or not, there are millions of Joes and Lisas out there. About 1/3 of Americans do not believe that climate change is caused by humans. 1/3 of them. They live in Idaho, they live in Texas, they live in Florida. But they also live in Massachusetts, in Oregon, and even right here in California. Sometimes it's a little challenging to talk with them about climate change, so we would like to offer you some tips offered by Eco America.
Make your comments people-focused, not polar bears or glaciers. Connect with people on common values.
Don't be self-righteous.
Make it real.
And emphasize solutions rather than focusing on the problems. And as you heard before us, there's a lot more tips available at Eco America. But for now, we're going to rewind a little bit. We're going to go back a couple pages.
Rewind.
Yep. We're going to go back to reset.
Hold on a minute.
And we're going to let Nick and Sarah, armed with these new tips, see if they can be a little more influential with their husbands. Ready? 3, 2, 1.
It's freezing here. It's so cold. Oh, kids, you have no idea. It is always freezing cold here in November. So much for global warming.
She's right, you know. You wouldn't know that the coldest Thanksgiving in Boise history was in 1985, got down to 2 degrees. And the warmest Thanksgiving was way back in the 1890s. So figure that. Coldest turkey day in recent history and the warmest over 100 years ago. So much for so-called climate change. I got to tell you guys, I am so sick and tired of this alarmist nonsense. The idea that the weather is changing and human beings are responsible, the entire thing is a hoax. Come on, Joe, you don't know what you're talking about.
I can handle it. Joey, you know I love you, right? I mean, we're family. We grew up together. We went to church together. We ditched church together.
Your point is?
I have to disagree with you.
Yeah, of course you do. Like, dude, climate change is totally real. Let's go get a kale smoothie, do some yoga, and talk about birds.
Okay, please don't dismiss us like that. Yes, we live in Los Angeles. Yes, I eat kale. I do yoga. I vote Democrat most of the time.
Most of the time.
But we are concerned about climate change and how it will affect our lives and the lives of our children. And if our children have children, Mom, you might, how it will affect their lives too. You remember how Mom and Dad used to struggle to make ends meet? They worked so hard to make a better life for us. You and I and Lisa and Nick, we all believe in hard work and making a better world for our children.
I believe that the children are our future. Teach them well and let them be free. Show them all the beauty that the best inside. Give them a
Sit down, mister. Look, we're not scientists, okay? But it doesn't take the local weather girl or boy to tell us that there are more hot days now than when we were kids. Oh, see, but now that's where you lose me. I mean, our weather report is telling us that we're having a severe cold front coming through next week. It could beat that record in 85. Yeah, but weather isn't climate, Aunt Lisa. Climate is the trends in weather. And we see those trends. Cycles are changing. Flowers bloom earlier, and mosquitoes carry new diseases. And we're getting more and more extreme weather. That's right. We just had a 5-year drought in California. It was the worst in state history, followed by the wettest year in recent history. Those huge swings are exactly what climate change scientists predicted. Look, we try to live a sustainable lifestyle. You know, we turned off our sprinklers, we started composting, we shopped locally, and Beth even started a writing campaign to our local elected officials. We live within our means, and we try not to waste water and power. We use just what we need.
We even got an electric car.
Do you remember what Dad used to drill into us? Clean up after your own mess, and when you're out there in public, leave it clean as how you found it. Mom drills that into us too.
Yeah, but it's more than that. Okay, yes, we have to contribute our part, but we have to do something on a grander scale. The planet is at stake.
Yes, but we have to start locally. It's a global issue, but it's also a local issue. And Dad, you and Uncle Joe don't have to agree on whether climate change is real, but we do have to agree that we need to clean up the planet, right? Otherwise, Earth will be as gross as Sam's room. Yay! I mean, that's exactly it. That's climate activism. It's just like Grandpa said. Start at home and take it out in public. That's why we care. We're just trying to leave all of this a little nicer than how we found it. A little nicer than how we found it. That makes sense to me, Joe. Like it. I never thought of that as climate activism before. Well, thank you for that, Missy. And speaking of not wasting anything, can we please enjoy this beautiful dinner? Yes. And future Madam President, can you please pass me those potatoes? Well, Madam President. Thank you. Is anything here vegan?
Okay, folks. Well, thank you for sitting through that. We found that to be highly entertaining and really helpful in Climate Day LA, because it really allowed us to talk specifically and to see a real life example of how some of the guidance that we like to provide people actually can be put into play. So, Grace, if you're there, I know there's only a couple of minutes left. I'd be happy to answer any questions that have come through.
All right, great, Dan. And thank you for taking the time to join us today. That past hour was incredibly informative. And thank you to everyone who was able to participate in this webinar. We hope you found it worthwhile and valuable. I do have a couple questions here, and I encourage participants to continue asking those questions the last couple minutes here. Number one we have here, how do you recommend elected officials engage religious leaders in the community, especially if you have to break through motivated avoidance?
That's a fantastic question. Obviously, as storytellers and as values leaders within the community, faith leaders are incredibly important allies. We're beginning to see a broader sense of need among faith leaders to get involved with this. And it really comes down to a belief that there is a moral imperative to solve climate issues. And so by grasping the moral imperative, which is fundamental to most religious faiths, the imperative to action to improve lives and to improve the planet, in this case, the community, that's one way to get around the motivated avoidance. I think you should start small, ask faith leaders to engage their own congregation, to ask not only to show leadership by greening, so to speak, the congregation itself, but asking congregants to participate by greening their own homes and their own practices. And once that starts to happen, then, you know, I think local elected leaders and civic leaders have a platform to engage those faith leaders in a broader community conversation. They can key off of the moral imperative and the need to improve the community as a way to get them to participate.
Okay, great. And just a reminder to those that follow the slides and the recordings will be available after. And then the next question, and unfortunately the last question we have, and any other questions we will put in written responses and send that with the follow-up along with some other resources. The last question we have here are, what are some examples of rewards for the community, and does funding need to be set aside for that?
Well, you know, if you have money, of course, there are awards that you can get engraved and you know and present to people at community gatherings, but it doesn't have to be anything like that. A lot of people just like the reward of recognition, and it can be featuring their actions and their leadership and in a news article or in the newsletter or in the community website. Acknowledging leaders during public speeches is a great way to show a reward, you know, to show recognition, and that provides a reward for them. I think people just, when they make an effort and they step out and begin to show their leadership, acknowledging that in large and small ways is a very helpful reward. Then, of course, you know, as I said, you get into some of the other awards, like, you know, can you certify their business as, or their congregation as, you know, as green or as sustainable, these sorts of things. And, you know, a small amount of research on Google will give you all kinds of great examples of certificates and awards. But again, it doesn't have to be costly or complicated. It can just be a simple acknowledgement that allows people to understand that they are appreciated and that their leadership is important to the community.
Okay, great. Thank you for that informative webinar and thoroughly answering the questions that we have here. And that concludes this webinar that we have and on our climate communications webinar series. Thank you again, Dan, for joining us and all those who were able to join the webinar. And stay tuned for our next webinar.
Thank you, Grace. Thanks, LGC, and everyone who was here. I appreciated the opportunity.
Thank you.